the timeless past.
Stoneford was too quiet. Not the kind of quiet you find in the woods or after snowfall, but the heavy kind. The kind that feels like the whole town is holding its breath, waiting for something. 17-year-old Jaden Cole had lived in Stoneford his whole life. His mother worked at the diner. His father, gone, taken years ago in a so-called mining accident. At least, that's what the town claimed. Most kids wanted out of Stoneford. But Jaden? He was tied to the place, tethered to its forests, its mountains, and its secrets. One autumn afternoon, while exploring the ridge, Jaden stumbled onto something hidden, a gap in the rocks, a cave, sealed off from the world, its entrance swallowed by brush, the kind of place no map dared to mark. A breath of cold air hit him as he stepped inside. The smell, damp stone, rust, maybe blood. His flashlight beam cut through the dark, catching old helmets, broken beams, shattered timbers, and then he found it, a cavern, and in the center, a pit. Inside that pit lay a man, a body, twisted, gray, half buried in dust, and on his chest, still pinned, still shining, a badge. Mine Safety Inspector. The same inspector who had vanished the year Jaden's father died. Jaden's heart pounded. He fumbled for his phone, snapped a photo, and froze. Footsteps, voices. Two men entered the cavern, their lanterns swung through the darkness, their boots crunching on gravel. "Still here," one growled. And the kid saw it, the other hissed. Jaden's blood ran cold. They knew. He ran, through twisting tunnels, his flashlight bouncing wildly, shadows chasing him at every turn. The men shouted behind him. Closer, closer. The air grew fresher. Pale daylight ahead. He burst from the cave, crashing through brush, tumbling down the slope until he reached the stream below. When he looked back, the cave was gone, hidden once more by the mountain's silence. That night, Jaden lay awake, every creak of the house making him flinch. His mother asked what was wrong. He couldn't tell her, because now he knew. Stoneford's silence wasn't silence at all. It was a secret, and that secret had his name written all over it. Jaden couldn't shake it. The image of the dead inspector, the voices in the cave, the men who saw him. All night he replayed it in his mind, the echo of their words, and the kid saw it. The next morning, Stoneford looked the same as always. Main Street, the diner, old men sitting on benches sipping bitter coffee, but Jaden felt different. Every glance lingered a little too long. Every smile seemed a little too thin. Were they watching him? Did they know? At school, things felt worse. He opened his locker and froze. Inside was a scrap of paper folded in half. No name, no handwriting, just 4 words written in black ink. Stay out, stay quiet. His hands trembled as he shoved it deep in his pocket. No one else noticed. But Jaden knew. Someone had been there. That afternoon, he tried to convince himself he was imagining things. Maybe it wasn't about the cave. Maybe it was some dumb prank. But then, walking home, he heard it. Bootsteps behind him. Slow. Heavy. When he turned, no one. Only the sound of wind scraping through the trees. Still, he felt it. Eyes. On his back. Watching. At home, his mother smiled tiredly at him from the stove. "Rough day?" she asked. He almost told her. Almost. But something held him back. He didn't want to put her in danger. That night, he couldn't sleep again. Every creak of the floorboards, every shift of the house made him sit upright. And then, just after midnight, he heard it. A car. Slowing outside their house. Jaden crept to the window, heart hammering. Headlights glowed against the curtains, then snapped off. The engine idled for a moment, and then silence. Whoever it was, they didn't knock. They didn't leave. They just sat there, watching. Jaden backed away from the window, barely breathing. Minutes crawled by. Then, at last, the engine rumbled again. The car pulled away, swallowed by the dark road. But the message was clear. This wasn't just about a cave anymore. It was about him. The next day in Stoneford felt wrong. Too many eyes, too many whispers. Jaden walked through the halls of school with his head down, but he could feel it. Someone was tracking his every move. When the final bell rang, he took the long way home, past the library, down an alley between the old hardware store and the boarded-up pharmacy. That's when he heard it. Bootsteps. Closer. Faster. Jaden turned and saw him. A man in a dark jacket, face shadowed by a cap, hands shoved deep in his pockets, moving with purpose. Jaden's pulse spiked. He started walking faster. The man did too. By the time Jaden broke into a run, he knew. This wasn't his imagination. He darted down the alley, cutting toward the back streets. Trash cans clattered as he shoved past them. The sound of pursuit thundered behind him. His sneakers pounded against the cracked pavement. Every corner felt like it would be the last. Every shadow looked like a trap. And then he slipped, hit the ground hard. Pain shot up his elbow. His phone skittered across the pavement. The man's boots echoed closer. Jaden scrambled, grabbed the phone, and bolted through a chain-link fence, tearing his sleeve. On the other side was the old rail yard, rows of rusting freight cars, half swallowed by weeds. He ducked behind one, gasping for air, heart hammering, blood in his throat. The man's footsteps slowed, closer, deliberate. Then, silence. Jaden pressed his back to the cold metal, every muscle in his body tense. Through a gap in the freight car, he saw him. The man stood in the open, scanning the shadows. Not rushing, not panicked, like he knew Jaden was still there. And then, the man pulled something from his pocket. Not a phone, not a flashlight, but a small radio. He lifted it to his mouth and spoke 4 words. "I've got the kid." Jaden didn't wait to hear more. He sprinted, through weeds, over tracks, lungs burning. Behind him, more voices shouted, more footsteps joined the chase. He didn't stop until he reached the tree line. The forest swallowed him whole, branches whipping his face as he plunged deeper, running blind. Finally, when his legs gave out, he collapsed against a tree, shaking, gasping, listening. But the night stayed quiet. For now. One thing was certain. It wasn't just strangers in the cave. It wasn't just whispers in the dark. This was bigger, organized. And they wanted him silenced. Aiden didn't go home that night. He couldn't. If those men knew where he lived, his mother would be next. Instead, he hid in the library. The old building closed at 8, but Jaden knew the back window that never locked. He slipped inside, curled between dusty shelves, and waited. Sleep never came. Only thoughts. The cave. The inspector's body. The men with radios. And the question burning in his mind. Why? By morning, he was too restless to stay still. He began searching. Not online. Stoneford's internet was a graveyard of half-broken links and censored archives. No, he searched the library's basement, the locked records room, a place most people had forgotten. But Jaden remembered. His father once showed him how to jimmy the latch with a pocket knife. Inside were boxes stacked high, old town documents, mining reports, newspapers yellowed with age, and then he found it. A file, stamped with the mine company's logo. Date, the year his father died. His hands shook as he opened it. Inside were pages of inspection notes signed by the missing inspector. The words blurred before his eyes. Unstable conditions. Toxic leaks. Immediate shutdown recommended. And at the bottom, in rushed handwriting, if anything happens to me, look to Stoneford Mine. They can't bury this forever. Jaden's chest tightened. This wasn't just about his father. This wasn't just an accident. It was a cover-up. But before he could process more, a noise. The creak of the library's main door. Slow, heavy, voices, men's voices. Jaden stuffed the file into his backpack, heart hammering. He ducked low, weaving through shelves, slipping toward the back exit, and then he froze. Through the glass of the stairwell door, he saw a shadow. A man waiting, trapped. Jaden turned back, racing deeper into the basement. Their footsteps thundered after him. Closer, closer. He pushed through a maintenance door, stumbled into a boiler room. Pipes hissed. Darkness pressed in. He had seconds, maybe less. So he did the only thing he could. He hid. Curled behind the furnace, clutching the file tight against his chest, praying they wouldn't hear his breath. The men entered. Their flashlights cut across the walls, beams sweeping closer. "Search everything," one growled. "He's here, and he knows too much." The furnace room was suffocating. Pipes rattled. Steam hissed, and Jaden pressed himself tighter into the shadows as boots scraped across the floor. Flashlight beams cut through the dark. Closer. So close he could see the dust swirling in their light. "Not here," one voice muttered. Another replied, low and cold, "Keep looking. He's a kid. He won't get far." Jaden's lungs burned from holding his breath. His heart slammed so loud he swore they could hear it. One beam swung past the furnace and froze. Jaden's blood turned to ice. Then a shout upstairs. "Doors open! Someone's here!" The men cursed. Their flashlights snapped away, and just like that, they were gone. Jaden waited. 1 minute, 2. Only when silence settled again did he dare to move. He slipped through the maintenance tunnel, emerging into the alley behind the library. Night had fallen, the streets washed in orange glow from flickering lamps. He thought he was safe, but then, "Jaden." His stomach dropped. The voice was familiar. He turned and saw Mr. Grady, the sheriff's deputy, the same man who'd driven him to baseball practice years ago. The same man who sat at his mother's counter every morning, sipping black coffee. "You shouldn't be out here," Grady said, too calm, too careful. "People are worried about you." Jaden clutched his backpack tighter. "Stay away." Grady took a step forward. "You've been digging where you shouldn't. That's dangerous." His voice was low now, warning. "Hand me the file, son. I'll take care of it." Jaden's throat closed. How did he know? How could he? Unless he was one of them. Jaden ran. Grady shouted, boots slamming the pavement behind him. The chase exploded down the street, through backyards, over fences, Jaden's lungs tearing with every breath. He cut toward the woods again, but Grady was faster than the others. He knew Stoneford, knew every shortcut. By the time Jaden reached the old mill, he was cornered. Broken windows gaped like teeth. Rust groaned in the wind. And Grady stepped out of the shadows, gun drawn. "Don't make this harder," he said. "Give me the file." Jaden's chest heaved. His mind raced. No way out. Then, a crack. The wooden beam above them snapped loose. Years of rot giving way. It crashed down between them, splitting the floorboards. Dust exploded into the air. And Jaden, coughing, blinded, sprinted through the haze. He didn't stop running until the mill was a distant silhouette. The file still pressed against his chest. The truth still his to keep. But now he knew. The danger wasn't strangers in the dark. It wasn't nameless men in caves. It was people he knew, people he trusted. And they would do anything to keep Stoneford's secret buried. Jaden didn't sleep. Not after the mill. Not after seeing the gun in Deputy Grady's hand. He kept moving through the night, the stolen file digging into his ribs with every step. By dawn, his legs shook, his mind burned, and yet he wasn't ready to stop. Not until he knew the truth. He ended up where he swore he'd never return, the mine. Stoneford's black scar in the earth. The rusted gates hung open, chains snapped years ago. Warning signs leaned half-buried in weeds. And beyond them, the yawning mouth of the cave. The same cave where his father had never come back. Inside, the air was damp, heavy. Every sound echoed too long. Water dripped from the ceiling like a clock counting down. Jaden's flashlight beam cut across old helmets, collapsed beams, and the skeletal remains of equipment. But deeper in, he found something else. An office, half buried by rockfall but still there. A desk, file cabinets, and on the wall, a photo. Jaden froze. It was his father, smiling, wearing a miner's helmet, surrounded by other men, and one of them was Deputy Grady. Jaden's stomach lurched. His father knew them, worked with them, maybe even trusted them. He dug through the desk drawers, desperate for answers, loose papers, safety reports, payroll slips, and then a letter, faded, torn. But the handwriting was his father's. Jaden read the words with shaking hands. They think I'll keep quiet. They think loyalty means silence. But the mine is poison. It's killing us, and soon it'll kill the town. If I disappear, tell Jaden the truth. Tell him not to trust the men in uniform. They don't protect us. They protect the mine. The page slipped from Jaden's fingers. The truth hit like a hammer. His father hadn't died in an accident. He'd been silenced by the very people sworn to protect the town. And now, they were after Jaden for the same reason. A noise echoed through the tunnel. Voices, bootsteps. Jaden killed the flashlight, heart racing in the black. He grabbed the letter, stuffed it into his backpack, and pressed himself into the shadows. The voices grew louder, closer, and among them, clear as a knife in the dark, Deputy Grady's. The tunnels shook with echoes of footsteps. Jaden pressed himself against the jagged wall, his breath shallow, heart hammering. The voices grew clearer. Men, armed, hunting, and leading them, Deputy Grady, his voice sharp, commanding. He's here. The boy knows too much. Don't let him out. Jaden's palms sweated against the flashlight he dared not switch on. He edged backward, deeper into the mine, one step at a time. Every shift of gravel beneath his boots felt like thunder, but the darkness was his only shield now. At the fork of the tunnel, he ducked left, squeezing into a collapsed passage. Broken beams jutted like spears. The air was tight, suffocating, but it led him somewhere new. An old elevator shaft. The rusted cage hung halfway down, cables frayed but still holding. Below yawned a black pit, endless and hungry. Jaden gripped the ladder rungs and climbed. Halfway down, the sound hit him. Voices, above. A flashlight beam pierced the shaft. They found the elevator! Jaden froze against the wall, clinging to the ladder as shadows moved above. Then, a metallic creak. A weight dropped onto the cage. Someone was climbing down after him. Panic surged through Jaden's chest. He couldn't outclimb them, couldn't outrun them. So he reached into his backpack, pulled free a rock, the only weapon he had. He waited, breath ragged, hands trembling. The man's boot appeared on the rung just above him, close enough to touch. Jaden swung. The rock smashed into the ankle. The man shouted, slipped, and fell. The scream echoed until it vanished into the pit below. Silence, heavy, crushing. Then Grady's voice echoing down the shaft. You think you can fight us, boy? You're just like your father, and you'll end the same way. Jaden's chest tightened, rage burning behind his fear. He climbed faster, forcing himself lower into the shaft, deeper into the dark. At the bottom, he found another tunnel, collapsed, but passable. He squeezed through jagged stone until he emerged into a cavern he'd never seen before. And what he saw made his blood run cold. Rows of barrels, dozens of them, marked with faded warning symbols. Toxic waste. The mine wasn't just dangerous, it was poisoned. The whole town was living above a ticking bomb, and before Jaden could move, a beam of light cut across the cavern. Grady stood at the entrance, gun raised. You shouldn't have come here, he said. Now you've seen everything. The cavern hummed with silence. Barrels loomed in the dark, their warning symbols glowing faintly in the beam of Grady's flashlight. and Jaden stood frozen, breath caught in his chest. One wrong move, and it was over. Grady's gun never wavered. "You should have stayed out of it, boy. Your father thought he could expose us too. Look where that got him." Jaden's fists clenched. "You killed him." Grady's eyes narrowed. "He killed himself when he chose the wrong side." The words dripped like poison. Jaden's fear twisted into fire. Then, a crack of stone above. The ceiling groaned, dust raining down. This cavern wasn't stable. Grady stepped closer. "Hand me the file, the letter, everything, or I swear you won't leave this mine alive." Jaden's mind raced. The barrels, the gun, the unstable roof. One shot in here, and the whole place could come down. He forced his voice steady. "You fire that gun, you'll bury us both." Grady smirked. "You think I care?" The gun lifted higher, and Jaden moved. He grabbed a loose chunk of rock and hurled it. It struck a barrel with a hollow clang. Grady flinched, just for a second. Jaden dove behind the crates as the gun roared. The shot ricocheted, echoing like thunder through the cavern. Chunks of rock rained from above. Dust swallowed the light. Jaden crawled, lungs burning, every shot behind him sparking against stone. Another barrel split open, a foul chemical stench flooding the air. Grady coughed, his voice ragged but furious. "You can't run forever!" Jaden spotted it. An old ventilation shaft, rusted but open. He scrambled toward it, dragging himself inside just as another bullet screamed past. The tunnel was tight, metal groaning under his weight, but it carried him upward, away from the gunfire, away from Grady's rage. He emerged into the night, gasping, collapsing against the grass. Behind him, the mine groaned like a wounded beast. Smoke seeped from the vents, carrying the stench of chemicals. Jaden lay there, chest heaving, knowing one thing for certain. This wasn't just about his father anymore. This was about saving Stoneford before it was poisoned for good. And far below, in the cavern, Grady's voice still echoed, muffled but clear. "This isn't over, boy. You hear me? It's just begun." The night air was cold, sharp against Jaden's lungs as he stumbled from the mine, dirt-streaked and shaking. He'd made it out alive. Barely. But he knew it couldn't last. Grady wouldn't stop. The men wouldn't stop. Not until Jaden was silenced, just like his father. He pushed himself forward, through the trees, back toward town. Every shadow felt like eyes watching. Every crunch of leaves made him whip around. And then, a light, faint, flickering. Not a flashlight, a lantern. Jaden crouched low, heart pounding. If it was Grady's men, he was finished. But when the figure stepped into view, Jaden froze. It wasn't a deputy, wasn't a miner. It was Clara, the town's librarian. Quiet, unassuming, the kind of woman most people barely noticed. But now, she stood in the woods at midnight holding a lantern like she was waiting for him. "Jaden," she whispered, "come with me. Quickly." He hesitated. Every warning in his head screamed trap. How could she know he'd be here? But something in her eyes, fear, urgency, pulled him forward. She led him through winding trails until they reached a small cabin hidden deep in the trees. Inside, stacks of papers and maps covered the table. Old mining records, photographs, newspaper clippings yellowed with age. Jaden's stomach twisted. She knew. Clara set the lantern down, her hands trembling. "I've been watching them for years. Your father tried to warn people, but no one listened. After he disappeared, I kept digging. I couldn't stop." She pushed a folder across the table. Inside were photos of the mine, barrels just like the ones Jaden had seen. And at the center of it all, Grady. Clara's voice dropped to a whisper. "They've been dumping chemicals down there for decades, covering it up, paying off anyone who asks questions. The sheriff, the mayor, they're all in on it." Jaden's throat tightened. "My father, he knew." Clara nodded. "And they silenced him for it." just like they'll try to silence you. For the first time since this nightmare began, Jaden felt something stir inside him. Not just fear, not just anger, hope. Maybe he wasn't alone anymore. But then, a noise outside. The crunch of boots in the dirt. Dozens of them. Clara's face went pale. They found us. The lantern flickered. Shadows shifted against the cabin walls. And a voice outside barked, "Come out, boy, you and your friend. Nobody has to get hurt." Grady. The cabin walls shook with every pounding fist. Windows rattled under the glare of flashlights outside. Jaden pressed his back to the door, chest heaving. Grady's voice thundered through the night. "You've got nowhere to run, boy. Hand it all over, the files, the proof, and maybe we'll let you live." Clara's eyes burned with fear, but her voice was steady. "They'll kill us whether we hand it over or not." Jaden scanned the room. No weapons, no phone, just paper. Old records. The truth. Useless against bullets. The door shook again, harder this time. A crack split the wood. They were coming in. Clara grabbed Jaden's arm and pulled him toward the back. "The cellar," she whispered. "They don't know it's there." A trap door hidden under a rug. She yanked it open, motioned him down. But before Jaden could move, glass shattered. A boot crashed through the window. Men poured inside, guns drawn. "Go!" Clara shoved him toward the trapdoor. Jaden dropped into the darkness just as the front door splintered. He reached back, trying to pull her down with him. But Grady was already there. He seized Clara by the arm, yanking her back. Jaden's blood ran cold. "No!" Grady's grin was sharp and cruel. "Run, boy. Hide in the dark. But she's mine now." Clara's scream echoed as the trapdoor slammed shut above him. Jaden froze in the cellar, fists clenched, heart tearing. He wanted to go back, wanted to fight, but boots pounded overhead, voices cursed, and then fire. The scent of smoke seeped down through the floorboards. They were burning the cabin, burying the evidence, burying him. Jaden's pulse roared in his ears. He scrambled through the black cellar, clawing at stone walls until his hand struck a draft of cool air, a narrow tunnel, an escape. He forced himself through, coughing, choking, until at last he burst out into the night, just as flames devoured the cabin behind him. He collapsed in the dirt, firelight flickering against his face. Clara was gone. The cabin was ash, and Grady's voice carried from the distance, mocking, merciless. "You can't save her. You can't save anyone. This ends when you're in the ground, boy." Jaden's hands trembled as he watched the fire climb higher. They had Clara. They had everything. But they didn't have him. And now, he wasn't just running, he was going to fight. The fire was still smoldering when Jaden left it behind. Every step felt heavier than the last. Clara's scream still echoed in his head. He couldn't leave her, not after she risked everything to help him. But he couldn't fight Grady head-on either. Not yet. He needed a way in, a way to find her. By dawn, Jaden had made it back to town. Stoneford looked the same as always. Quiet streets, shops opening, kids heading to school. But he saw it differently now. Every smile felt like a mask. Every glance over a shoulder like a warning. How many of them were in on it? How many were bought or too scared to speak? He stuck to alleys, kept his head down, until he spotted something, a black SUV parked outside the sheriff's office. And there, through the glass, stood Clara, handcuffed, alive. Grady leaned against the desk, laughing with the sheriff like nothing was wrong, like kidnapping and cover-ups were just another day's work. Jaden's gut twisted. He had to get her out. But storming in would be suicide. He slipped around the back of the building, searching for another way. And that's when he found it. An unlocked basement door half hidden by weeds. The stairwell was damp, the air thick with mold. Old evidence boxes lined the walls, dusty files no one bothered to touch, and voices above. Grady's, sharp and certain. She knows too much. We'll deal with her tonight, quietly. Then the boy. Jaden's fists clenched. Tonight. That meant he had hours, no more. He crept deeper, past the basement, until he found an old service hatch leading up behind the cells. Through the bars, he saw her. Clara sitting on a bench, bruised but unbroken. Her eyes widened when she spotted him in the shadows. "Jaden?" she whispered. He pressed a finger to his lips. "Stay quiet. I'll get you out." But before he could act, a heavy door creaked open. Boots stomped down the hallway. Grady. Jaden melted back into the shadows as Grady approached the cell, his smile cold. "You've made a mistake siding with him, but don't worry. By tonight, no one will even remember your name." Clara lifted her chin, defiant even in chains. "They'll remember, because the truth always survives." Grady laughed. "Not in Stoneford, it doesn't." He turned, keys jangling on his belt, and for a split second his gaze swept past the shadows. Jaden's breath stopped, but Grady didn't see him. Not yet. The moment the sheriff called from upstairs, Grady left, the heavy door slamming shut behind him. Jaden's heart pounded. The keys. He needed those keys. And if he was going to save Clara, he had only one night to do it. The night came fast, dark, heavy. Every sound on Stoneford streets felt sharper, more dangerous. Jaden kept to the shadows, his pulse pounding in time with his footsteps. He had nothing but desperation, no weapons, no backup, but he had a plan, and he had no choice. He circled the sheriff's office, eyes on the second floor where Clara was locked away. Guards lounged out front, laughing, sipping coffee. Too relaxed. They weren't expecting him. Not here. Not tonight. Jaden crept to the back again, the same basement door he'd found earlier. It creaked under his hand, loud enough to stop his heart. But no one came. Inside, the air was damp and still. Every step felt like it echoed for miles. He reached the service hatch, pressed his ear to the wood. Silence. Then, slowly, he pushed it open. Clara sat up as soon as she saw him, her eyes wide but steady. "You came." "Always," he whispered. He pulled a bent nail from his pocket. Makeshift, crude, stolen from the basement shelves. It wasn't much, but it might be enough. He worked the lock. Sweat dripped into his eyes. Every tick of metal on metal felt like thunder. And then, click. The cell door eased open. Clara stood, wrists raw from the cuffs. Jaden steadied her as she stumbled forward. "We have to go, now!" But before they could move, the heavy door above slammed open. Voices, boots. Too late. Jaden grabbed Clara's hand and yanked her into the shadows just as a deputy stormed down the hall. The man spotted the open cell, cursed, and reached for his radio. Jaden didn't think. He lunged. The struggle was fast, messy. A fist to the jaw, a muffled cry, the deputy collapsing to the floor. Jaden's chest heaved, his knuckles ached. He'd crossed a line. There was no turning back now. They ran, weaving through the basement, bursting into the night air at the back of the building. Alarms blared, shouts carried on the wind. Clara gasped, clutching his arm. "They'll hunt us!" "They already are," Jaden said, dragging her toward the woods. "But we're not done yet." Behind them, the whole town seemed to wake. Engines roared, lights flared, and at the center of it all, Grady's voice booming in fury. "Find them! Tonight it ends!" Jaden and Clara vanished into the trees, breath ragged, the night swallowing them whole. For now, they were free. But the war for Stoneford had only just begun. The forest was their only refuge. Tall pines swallowed them whole, branches scraping like fingers in the dark. Every twig snap, every owl call, felt like pursuit. Jaden half-dragged Clara through the undergrowth until her legs gave way. They collapsed together beneath a fallen tree, lungs burning, hearts hammering. For the first time since the jailbreak, silence pressed in around them. Clara's voice broke the stillness. "They won't stop. Not until one of us is dead." Jaden turned to her, face pale in the moonlight. "Then we don't run forever. We make them stop." She shook her head. "We're two people against an entire town." "Not a town," Jaden said, jaw tight. "Just Grady, his grip, his lies. If we cut him off, the rest falls apart." By dawn, they stumbled upon an old hunting cabin deep in the woods, abandoned, weathered, half-collapsed, but shelter. Inside, dust hung in the air, but the roof held. A wood stove stood cold in the corner, and on the walls, maps, old, yellowed, marked with trails and forgotten paths. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Days blurred together. They rationed scraps from a half-broken pantry, drank from a creek that ran nearby. Clara cleaned the wounds on Jaden's hands, wrapped them in strips of cloth. Jaden mended the stove, coaxed fire from damp logs. In the quiet, they talked. Not just about Grady or the files or Stoneford's secrets, but about the lives they'd lost, and the faint, fragile hope of the one they might still build, if they survived. One night, as wind rattled the shutters, Clara stared into the flames. "What if we can't win?" she whispered. Jaden didn't answer at first. He stared into the fire, the weight of it all heavy on his shoulders. Then he said, low but certain, "Then we make sure they never forget we tried." The next morning, a plan began to take shape. Not to keep running, not to keep hiding, but to strike back. They had the maps, they had each other, and maybe, just maybe, they had the courage to turn shadows into weapons. But as they prepared, they didn't know. Grady wasn't just hunting them, he was baiting them, and the noose was already tightening. The cabin had become more than shelter. It had become war council. By lantern light, Jaden traced routes across the old maps with a steady finger. Clara sat beside him, watching, listening, committing every detail to memory. "They move supplies through the North Trail," Jaden said. "Fuel, weapons, food. Without it, Grady's men lose their grip." Clara nodded slowly. "And if we hit them?" "We don't hit them," Jaden said. "We cripple them." The night was their ally. Mist clung low to the forest floor as they crept toward the trail. Jaden carried nothing but a crowbar and stolen matches. Clara, a length of rope and nerves of steel. They waited in silence, the forest alive with the hum of insects. Then, headlights pierced the trees. The convoy. A black truck groaned down the rutted path, loaded with crates. Two armed men walked alongside, rifles slung casual. Too casual. They weren't expecting ghosts. Jaden moved first. A branch snapped, deliberate. The nearest guard turned, frowning, rifle raising, and Clara struck. The rope whipped around his throat, yanked tight. He hit the ground without a sound. The second guard barely had time to shout before Jaden's crowbar cracked across his jaw. The man crumpled. The truck kept rolling, oblivious, until Jaden leapt onto the back, prying open a crate. Inside, gasoline stacked in metal cans. Perfect. "Clara!" he hissed. She scrambled up beside him. Together, they doused the crates, the smell sharp, choking. Then Jaden struck a match. For a heartbeat, the flame trembled in the dark, and then fire roared to life, devouring the truck in a rush of orange heat. The blast lit the forest like dawn. The convoy screeched to a halt, men shouting, scrambling. By then, Jaden and Clara were gone, shadows slipping back into the trees. From the ridge above, they watched the fire consume everything. Clara's face glowed in the flames, fierce, unyielding. "That'll send him a message." Jaden's jaw tightened. No, that was the message. But deep in Stoneford, Grady stood at his office window, the fire's glow flickering on the horizon, and for the first time, his smile faltered. "Find them!" he snarled. "I don't care what it takes, find them!" The fire still burned in the forest when Grady called his men. Stoneford's streets echoed with the growl of engines, the crackle of radios, the bark of orders. He wasn't smiling now. Not anymore. "They think they can play soldier?" he hissed, pacing the sheriff's office. "They think they can make me bleed?" His hand slammed the desk. "Then we hunt them like dogs." Jaden and Clara didn't know it yet. Back at the cabin, they were sketching boulder plans, maps littered with red marks, supply lines they could hit, allies they might rally. They thought they were hidden. They thought the forest was theirs. But the forest was no longer silent. It began with the birds, gone. The morning air was still, too still. Then Clara caught it, the faint crunch of boots in the distance, not one pair. Dozens. Her breath caught. "Jaden, they're here." The first bullet punched through the cabin wall. Wood splintered. Smoke and dust filled the air. Jaden threw Clara down just as a second shot tore across the stove. The maps caught fire curling in the flames. Voices shouted outside, dozens, maybe more. The trap had sprung. Jaden kicked the back door open, dragging Clara into the trees. Bullets chased them, snapping bark, cutting air. Men's voices echoed through the pines. Closer, closer. They ran until their lungs burned. But the forest, their refuge, now felt like a cage. Every path led to another shadow, another threat. By nightfall, they had lost the cabin, lost their maps, lost their fire. Exhausted, they collapsed beside a cold stream, listening to the hounds baying far off in the dark. Clara shivered, clutching her knees. "They'll never stop, Jaden. He'll burn this whole forest if he has to." Jaden stared into the black water, face grim. "Then we stop hiding. We turn this hunt around." But deep in the trees, a lantern glowed. One of Grady's scouts watching, waiting, already marking their trail. The trap wasn't over. It was only beginning. The forest that once betrayed them was now their weapon. Jaden crouched low in the brush, fingers tight around a jagged branch he'd sharpened into a spear. Beside him, Clara's eyes burned with the same fire that lit his own. They weren't prey anymore. Not tonight. Boots crunched in the distance. Grady's men moved slow, cautious, rifles sweeping side to side. The glow of lanterns bobbed between the trees like wandering stars. A dog barked once, then whined, its chain yanked. "Spread out," a voice growled. "Sheriff wants them alive." Alive. For now. Jaden whispered to Clara, his breath barely stirring the air. "On my signal." The hunters drew closer, shadows stretching long across the forest floor. One man stopped, right beside the trap. The rope snapped tight. The forest floor gave way. He fell into the pit Jaden had carved, branches snapping under his weight, his screams smothered by earth. Chaos erupted. Lanterns swung wildly. Shouts echoed through the night. Then Clara moved. A stone whistled through the dark, striking another man square in the temple. He dropped like a puppet with its strings cut. Jaden leapt from the brush, spear driving into the lantern, glass exploding, fire licking across the leaves. The forest lit up, shadows twisting, faces pale in the sudden glow. Panic spread through Grady's men. They fired into the dark, bullets finding nothing but trees. Jaden and Clara slipped between the flashes, striking, vanishing, striking again. A whisper of movement, a sudden scream, another man down. It wasn't war, it was fear. By the time the last lantern sputtered out, silence had returned. The forest was theirs again. Jaden and Clara stood over the chaos they'd left behind. Bodies lay scattered, weapons abandoned. For the first time, Grady's hunters had become the hunted. But as they gathered what they could, rifles, ammo, packs, they knew this was only a small victory. Grady wouldn't stop. He'd come harder, stronger. Still, for the first time, Jaden felt it deep in his chest. The balance was shifting. Far away in Stoneford, Grady slammed a fist on the table as the reports came in. Half his men gone, the forest against him. And a boy he thought broken was now fighting like a wolf. Stoneford slept uneasy that night. Lanterns burned late in windows, doors barred tight, whispers crawling through the streets. The sheriff's men were gone. The hunters had not returned, and the fire in the woods still smoldered, staining the sky red. For the first time, fear wasn't in Jaden and Clara's hearts. It was in the town's. They slipped from the tree line at midnight, shadows moving along the dirt road. Jaden carried a stolen rifle slung low across his back. Clara's hand clutched the satchel filled with scraps of dynamite salvaged from a logging shed. Every step into Stoneford was a step deeper into the lion's den. The courthouse loomed first, tall, proud, but empty, its clock tower silent, windows black. "This is where he rules from," Clara whispered. "Not for long." Jaden's jaw tightened. "Not if we tear it apart from the inside." They moved like smoke through the alleys. A pair of deputies slouched near the saloon, rifles resting across their knees. Drunk. Careless. Jaden struck first. The butt of his rifle cracked against one man's skull. Clara swung her satchel, sending the other crashing into the mud. They left them breathing, but broken. Inside the saloon, they found more than whiskey and cards. Maps, supply lists, names, dozens of names, scribbled across ledger pages, people Grady had bought, threatened, owned. Clara's hands trembled as she turned the pages. "He owns everything. Everyone." Jaden's eyes hardened. "Not anymore." He struck a match, dropped it onto the pile. The flames climbed fast, devouring the ledger, painting the walls in orange light. By the time they left, smoke curled through Stoneford's main street. The town stirred, doors opening, voices rising in alarm. But Jaden and Clara were already gone, slipping deeper toward the heart of the town. The sheriff's office, Grady's throne. From the shadows, they saw him. Grady, standing tall on the porch, a cigar glowing at his lips. His men gathered close, faces grim, rifles gleaming in the firelight. He didn't look afraid, not yet. But his hand tightened around the pistol at his hip, as if deep down, he knew. The storm had finally come home. Stoneford was no longer asleep. It was awake, angry, alive with firelight and shouting voices. The saloon still smoldered, its roof collapsing in sparks. Smoke drifted down the main street as townsfolk whispered from their doorways. Fear had cracked open into something else, something dangerous. And in the shadows, Jaden and Clara moved like ghosts. They struck fast. A supply cart set ablaze outside the general store. A rope cut sending barrels of grain tumbling into the mud. A deputy dragged into an alley, gagged and bound before he could scream. Every blow was small, but together, they were thunder. Grady's grip on the town was slipping, inch by inch. On the courthouse steps, Grady barked orders, his voice a whip. "Find them! Search every house! Tear this town apart if you have to!" His men scattered, rifles raised, boots pounding the dirt. But the more they searched, the less they found. Because Jaden and Clara were never where they looked. Always one step ahead. Always watching. At one corner, Clara lit a fuse, sparks hissing down the cord. She hurled the stick into a feed shed. The blast rattled windows for 3 blocks. At another, Jaden ambushed a patrol, his stolen rifle cracking once, twice. And then he was gone, melting into the dark. Whispers spread through the townsfolk like wildfire. "They're here. They're fighting back. They're not afraid." For the first time, Stoneford saw Grady's power falter, and in the cracks, hope began to take root. But Grady was not a man to break easy. He stood on the sheriff's porch, cigar smoke curling from his lips, eyes hard as iron. "Enough of this," he growled. "Bring me the boy. Bring me the girl. Alive or dead, I don't care which." His words carried through the street, a blade in the night. Jaden and Clara watched from the rooftops, crouched in the dark above him. Clara's hand tightened around Jaden's arm. "He'll burn this whole town to get us." Jaden's gaze never left Grady. Then we make our move before he does. The game of shadows was ending, the storm was gathering, and in Stoneford's heart, a reckoning waited. Stoneford's streets were scarred by fire, the saloon, a husk of smoke, the feed shed, rubble, the air thick with the scent of ash and gunpowder. But beneath the ruin, something new stirred. Whispers, defiance, the spark of rebellion. Jaden and Clara moved through the alleys, slipping door to door. They expected fear, silence, closed shutters. Instead, they found eyes meeting theirs. A hand opening a back door. A loaf of bread pressed into Clara's hands. A jug of water set quietly on the step. No words were spoken. None were needed. The people had seen Grady bleed, and for the first time, they believed he could fall. But Grady was far from broken. From the porch of his office, he rallied what men remained. The clatter of rifles filled the night as wagons rolled in, crates of ammunition stacked high. He paced like a caged beast, fury burning hotter than the fires around him. "They think they can strike at me in my own town?" he roared. "They think they can turn my people against me?" His fist slammed against the wood, splinters flying. "Then we show them what happens to traitors. At dawn we scour this place clean, house by house, street by street." The order spread like poison, carried on his men's voices. By morning, Stoneford would be under siege, every home searched, every whisper silenced, unless Jaden and Clara acted first. In a stable at the edge of town, Jaden unrolled the maps they had salvaged. The courthouse, the sheriff's office, the armory. Clara leaned close, her voice low but steady. "If we hit the armory, they'll have nothing left to fight with." Jaden nodded. "But Grady won't go down easy. He'll make his last stand." His hand pressed against the map, hard enough to leave a crease. "Then we finish it. Here, in Stoneford." Outside, the town lay heavy in silence, waiting for dawn. Some with fear, some with hope, all with the knowledge that tomorrow, nothing would ever be the same. And in the dark, as Jaden and Clara readied themselves, a movement began to rise. Small, quiet, but growing. Stoneford's people were no longer just watching. They were choosing a side. The final storm was coming, and it would break in Stoneford's heart. Stoneford's streets were scarred by fire, the saloon, a husk of smoke, the feed shed, rubble, the air thick with the scent of ash and gunpowder. But beneath the ruin, something new stirred. Whispers, defiance, the spark of rebellion. Jaden and Clara moved through the alleys, slipping door to door. They expected fear, silence, closed shutters. Instead, they found eyes meeting theirs. A hand opening a back door. A loaf of bread pressed into Clara's hands. A jug of water set quietly on the step. No words were spoken. None were needed. The people had seen Grady bleed, and for the first time, they believed he could fall. But Grady was far from broken. From the porch of his office, he rallied what men remained. The clatter of rifles filled the night as wagons rolled in, crates of ammunition stacked high. He paced like a caged beast, fury burning hotter than the fires around him. "They think they can strike at me in my own town?" he roared. "They think they can turn my people against me?" His fist slammed against the wood, splinters flying. "Then we show them what happens to traitors. At dawn, we scour this place clean, house by house, street by street." The order spread like poison, carried on his men's voices. By morning, Stoneford would be under siege. Every home searched, every whisper silenced, unless Jaden and Clara acted first. In a stable at the edge of town, Jaden unrolled the maps they had salvaged. The courthouse, the sheriff's office, the armory. Clara leaned close, her voice low but steady. "If we hit the armory, they'll have nothing left to fight with." Jaden nodded. "But Grady won't go down easy. He'll make his last stand." His hand pressed against the map, hard enough to leave a crease. "Then we finish it. Here, in Stoneford." Outside, The town lay heavy in silence, waiting for dawn, some with fear, some with hope, all with the knowledge that tomorrow nothing would ever be the same. And in the dark, as Jaden and Clara readied themselves, a movement began to rise, small, quiet, but growing. Stoneford's people were no longer just watching. They were choosing a side. The final storm was coming, and it would break in Stoneford's heart. The sun climbed higher over Stoneford. Its light broke across rooftops blackened by fire, across streets scarred by battle, across faces still streaked with ash and grief. Grady was gone. The people gathered in the square, weary but unbowed. Mothers clutched their children. Fathers leaned on broken rifles. Neighbors, once divided by fear, now stood side by side. And at the heart of it all, Jaden and Clara. They were not heroes in shining armor. Their clothes were torn, their hands bloodied. But to Stoneford, they were proof that courage could outlive fear, that even the hunted could rise and turn the tide. The blacksmith stepped forward first, voice rough but steady. "You saved this town." An old woman followed, placing her hand on Clara's shoulder. "No, you gave it back to us." The days that followed were not easy. Ruins needed rebuilding, wounds needed healing, and the memory of fire would never fully fade. But in the ashes, Stoneford built again. Together. Jaden took work at the forge. His strength now turned to creation, not destruction. Clara taught children in the old church, her voice carrying hope where once there had been silence. They did not speak often of Grady, nor of the long nights in the forest. But when they did, it was not with fear. It was with the quiet pride of survivors. And sometimes, when the stars were bright above the town, Jaden would look to Clara and smile faintly. "We made it." And she would nod, her eyes shining. "No, Jaden, we built it." Stoneford would never be the same. But it no longer belonged to one man's cruelty. It belonged to its people, to freedom, to tomorrow. And as the years rolled on, the story of that night would not fade. It would be told by firelight, whispered in homes, carried by children yet to come. The story of the boy and the girl who rose from the ashes. The story of a town reborn,